I'm very excited about this video. AT2035, AT4040, intermediate versus semi-pro microphones in the condenser microphone genre, category, group, whatever you want to call it. It is going to be a fun one, and I hope that you guys learned something and hope you are well informed on which microphone that you're going to get. Alright, so let's roll right into this. We're going to talk about the build and the dimensions, the weight, right off the bat. These two microphones are some of the most popular condenser microphones on the market, mostly because of their price. $150 versus $300. Double the price, and they are pretty much very similar in like the specs, meaning that they're not too crazy with the fluctuations. So what you're paying for is a tone that you're really looking for, and maybe that extra $150 gives you that tone that you really want. And I know that the AT4040 is very popular among singers, especially in the R&B, hip-hop, and rap genres. So if you're in that, keep it in mind, but also you might be able to save a little bit of money if you consider the AT2035 as your option as well. But before we go into those, let's talk about these microphones aesthetically and how they look. And of course, never buy a microphone by how it looks, buy a microphone by how it sounds. But it's fun to talk about, and it's cool to discuss this stuff because it's microphones and it's gear. It's supposed to be fun. So we got the AT2035 and the AT4040, very different styles. You got the 20 series style and the 40 series style. So they stick to their guns with the type of microphone housing that they have. So the AT2035 is a little bit more chunky. It's got a little bit more beef to it, built very well, and has the engraved text and logo on the front. Also with the 2035, you have a glossy kind of finish. The 4040, on the other hand, has a little bit more of a matte. It's a little glossy, but it's more of a matte look, considering that it is less shiny. Now on the 4040 side, you got the sweet logo on the front. I really love that nice little medallion style kind of thing. And for the most part, other than that, it got a nice sleek tucked design. Nothing else, no other writing other than the back. I think it has a little bit of writing. And of course, as far as similarities, they both have switches. 2 on each. One is a 10 dB pad and one is a low cutoff, both at 80 Hertz. Now let's move on to the weights, and to be honest, from the description that I gave you about how they look aesthetically, it's not going to surprise you that much, and they're not that different in weight, but there is a difference. So you have a 40-gram difference. Not a big deal when you're holding them side by side and hand in hand. You notice the difference, but it's not that big of a deal. I say this in a lot of videos. If a boom arm and a mic stand can handle a pod mic, it can handle just about anything like this. And you don't have to worry about that. And just so you know, the pod mic is over 900 grams. So keep that in mind. Next up, let's go into the dimensions. So as far as the build is concerned and the aesthetics, I really love the look of both of them. I will lean a little bit closer to the 4040 because I like that tucked in look and the way that it's put together. That's just my personal preference, but there's nothing wrong with the 2035. It's just I prefer the 4040 style. Let me know down in the comments what one you prefer. Now let's get into some techie talk and talk about the specs, the tech, and eventually at the end we'll get to the frequency response curve and break those down and see the differences, the similarities, and really how they're tuned on a paper and see if that really represents them as the tone that you hear. I'm going to put up a chart of all the specs and the stuff that is put into these. I'm not going to bore you with all of it, so you can check those out, check out the manual, and of course I will answer any questions that you guys have any questions about. So as you saw in those specs, you notice that the differences aren't that much. And the 2035 has very similar specs. As I said before, there's a lot of specs on these that really don't show the difference. For the most part, when you're making a decision between these two, or if you're making a decision for an upgrade, the tone and what you're looking for is the key. And we'll get into that as we move along, but that's key. The tone, that what you're looking for. Looking at these frequency response curves, you notice a lot of similarities between the two. And the first thing that stands out is the low end, meaning that the low cutoff on both of these is at 80 hertz. And when they're not engaged, they're fairly flat and a little bit lower than 0 decibels. It's not a big deal. They both have a dip around 100, so not that crazy of a difference, but they are very similar. So keep that in mind with the low end. That being said, the AT4040 does have a little bit more of presence in that low end. It might not be, like I said, a lot of times the frequency response curve doesn't necessarily tell us everything. Sometimes it's a little different. You notice that the 4040 has a little bit more bass tone to it, and that doesn't really reflect on the frequency response curve. Then as we move on to the midsection, they are very flat, very good, very nice for a spoken word microphone. And if you're using this for singing or anything like that, it will be a lot easier to capture your performance that much more clean. The next section I want to talk about is the section between 1 and 5K as we get into the mid highs and highs. You notice that the 2035 has a more presence boost in that section. It could be that they were trying to emphasize a lower budget microphone, or maybe it's just tuned a little bit better. I'm not really sure. I've listened to them and it's close, and we'll get more into depth with it when we go into the booth, but I really like that presence boost. It's subtle, it's nice, it's not too overwhelming. But on the other hand, the 4040 does have a nice flat curve in that section, and it also has a bit of a dip right before it gets to 5K. I don't think it's that big of a deal because I feel that the 4040 was marketed as a more lower bassy kind of tone. Now next, right after 5K, we go into the 6, 7K, and you see peaks on both of them. A little bit more of a drastic peak for the 4040 than the 2035. I think you'll really hear it in some people's voices. Like sometimes you hear it in my nasally kind of voice in some parts. Now that we get to about 9K, right before 10K, the 4040 dips and the 2035 rises, still giving you a bit of a presence boost. And now that we move past 10K, you'll notice there's a higher presence boost on the 2035, and the 4040 has some presence boost but dips off. So the real question is, as far as looking at these frequency response curves on a chart, if I was to look at them and give you an honest answer of which one looks better, not necessarily sounds better, I think I lean towards the 2035 because those drastic peaks and valleys in the high end for the 4040 might be a little bit too much. Depends on what you're recording. At least in my opinion, I feel like it's a little much, so I will lean towards the 2035 as far as the frequency response is concerned. Okay, so 2 more tests while we're in the little studio here. I'm going to be quiet for a little bit, and we're going to boost it up in post, and I'm going to show you how these microphones are with just natural sounds of the microphones. I'm going into a Zoom F6 right now, and both the switches, let me double check. Yeah, all the switches are off. So it's natural, the way the microphone is built naturally. So here you go. Okay, so there is a dehumidifier, as I point out all the time, rumbling in the other room. You might have heard it. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to engage both the low cutoffs. They're all cutting off. They're both cutting off at 80 hertz. So keep that in mind, and we're going to do another silence test. Alright, so switches are off. We're going to do one more test in the studio. Off-axis rejection, both 90s and 180. Alright, so we're doing a 90-degree test on the AT4040 side. I'm about 2 feet away right now, and this is going to be how it's going to sound. Talking at a decent level, not too crazy, not too loud. So we're on the AT2035 side right now, about 2.5, 3 feet away. And this is what your off-axis rejection is going to be. Mildly treated room, nothing crazy, little bit of soft surfaces. The reflective surfaces are right where the camera's facing right now, some wood, some masonite. Now finally we're at 180 degrees, and this is going to be your off-axis rejection for these microphones. No switches are engaged, but we're going to do another test of off-axis rejection with both the low cutoffs on, and we're going to do that right now. Alright, back on the 4040 side with the off-axis rejection with the low cutoff turned on, both of them. And this is what you're going to hear with the low cutoff. Remember, it's 80 hertz. It's rolling off, so everything below 80 hertz is getting cut. Next up, 90 degrees on the 2035 side, about 2.5 feet away. This is your off-axis rejection with the low cutoff turned on. And yeah, so this is what you're going to hear. Finally, we're at 180 degrees. This is what you're going to hear with the off-axis rejection of the... So, there's your off-axis rejection. The next couple of tests are going to be in a booth. We're going to go into those rooms and see how they sound. I'm very excited to test these things in the booth and see how they react to being in a more enclosed and treated area. Alright, so we're in the booth right now with the 2035 and the 4040. And it's a interesting conversation we're going to have. And yes, it's a conversation because I'm not just a crazy person talking to myself in a booth. I know people are watching these videos. So go leave your comments in the comments section so I don't feel like a crazy person in a padded room. So yes, we have the 4040 and the 2035. And my first impressions, I like the 4040 a little bit better, just a little bit. And I'm going to go into how I feel about how they sound live. That is totally different when it comes to post listening. I said this in a couple of videos. There's a big difference between listening to it live and listening to it post. So the thing that I notice mostly, I'm listening to the 4040 right now. And the thing that I notice mostly is, of course, that 4040 has the lower end more pronounced. It's not that much, but it's noticeable. The other thing that I notice is the 4040 is more warm and smooth. It has like a very welcoming sound to it. Now, if I switch over to the 2035, I'm listening to it now, and when I compared it to the 2020, the 2020 felt a little bit more airy and like open. The 2035 felt compressed. And what I'm noticing now is these two are a little bit more on par with each other. So the next thing we're going to do a Plosive test with the pop filter and without. 2035 first. 4040. Of course, you shouldn't use a microphone without a pop filter or at least a windscreen. So just so you know, have something in front of it just to help you out. I mean, it just goes a long way. Okay, so next up, we're going to be engaging the low cutoff on the 4040. Then we'll switch back on, low cutoff on 2035, and then put them both on. All right, right now we have the low cutoff on the 4040. The 2035 is flat. And this is what you're going to hear, comparatively speaking, of the two microphones, one with the low cutoff. Both have an 80 hertz cut on low cutoff. Now, what you're really going to notice is the proximity effect difference. So if I get up on the microphones right now, you probably notice that the AT4040 has a little bit less rumble. As I've mentioned a couple of times before, the Geralt grunt. If you know what I'm talking about, you know. And a lot of those rumbles are gone. Maybe on the AT2035, you notice the rumbles are still there because the low cutoff is not on. Let's turn the low cutoff off on the 4040 and turn it on the 2035. All right, low cutoff on the 2035 and no cutoff natural sound from the 4040. This is what you're going to hear with both of these microphones rolling off 80 hertz, both of them the same, which is nice. 80 hertz, in my opinion, is probably the most you would go. I would probably want to go that far higher. Let's do a little proximity effect and see if you notice the difference. And see if you noticed a Geralt rumble, or Geralt grunt is what I'm calling it, is what you're noticing. Less of the low ends and maybe some of that rumble in my voice in the lows. So let me know down in the comments what you think, and if you think one is better than the other. All right, so my impressions of the booth. I really, really like the 4040 more. I'm listening to the 2035 right now, though, and what I really have noticed, let me back up a bit. What I really have noticed is the 4040 definitely has that lower, bassier tone to it. It's not overwhelming, but if I was to switch to the 4040 now, and yes, it has more of that lower end. All right, so that's it in the booth. Let's go to the untreated room and see how these things fare in that untreated room. All right, so we're in the untreated room. If you've seen my videos before, you know this room is roughly about 10 by 10, give or take, maybe 8 by 8. Not really sure. I'm not breaking out the ruler for this one. 8-foot ceilings. Reflective surfaces in some areas, but there's a lot of stuff in the room, so that helps when you're dealing with reverberations and reflections. The glass behind me could be an issue, but the big thing here is area rug underneath me makes a big difference with the reflection off the ceiling, especially because then it doesn't bounce back the other way. It might bounce from one to the other, but it is suppressed. There are parts of the floor that are still wood, so that might be an issue, but you guys let me know what you think about the sound and what you're going to deal with. I tell you these dimensions just to see if you can make a connection to it. So if you have a very similar situation with drywall on the walls and wood floors possibly, this is what you're going to encounter roughly. Of course, every scenario is different, but you got a good idea of what you're going to be dealing with. Next up, we're going to do a test with 90 degrees and 180 degrees for the off-axis test. And I will switch off the low cutoff, so it's just vanilla. If you are interested in off-axis tests with the low cutoffs, go check out the individual videos. I don't remember if I did it on the 4040 video, but I have a part 2 planned. So keep in mind that there will be a part 2. All right, so we're on 90 degrees stage right here on the AT2035 and AT4040. This is going to be your off-axis test, and I'm about like 2 feet away right now. And this is how it's going to sound in an untreated room. Next up, we got the 90 degree on the opposite side, stage left. And this is what you're going to hear with the AT2035 and the AT4040. Maybe some of the reflections off the glass, we don't necessarily know. Well, I don't necessarily know exactly, but I have a feeling that there's some. And lastly, 180 degrees. I'm about like 3 feet away right now. And this is what you're going to hear with the off-axis rejection of the AT2035 and the AT4040. All right, so there's the test and in your untreated room, and that's how it is. Let's go finish up this video into the outro. Alright, so we're in the last bit of editing right now, and I totally forgot to do an outro. The video is supposed to come out tomorrow morning. And yeah, I forgot to do this part. Granted, it's a little part that I'm gonna edit, no problem. But regardless, yeah, I prefer the 4040. I gotta be honest. And of course, if I think about it critically, and if I think about it in a way that with no bias, no personal thing for me, if you're looking for a microphone between the $150 and $300 mark, maybe you might be better off getting the 2035 if you're not picky about a tone or picky about specific things. For me, I enjoy the tone a lot better on the 4040. I feel like it's tuned a lot better. Those high ends, yes, they are specifically tuned and peaked very precisely. The 2035 has a more smooth frequency response, but it doesn't always translate, as I said before. But overall, I feel that that lower emphasis on the 4040 and that nice tone in the top end really brings it out, and it's worth the extra cash for the microphone. And of course, a lot of people agree with me in the comments and people talking about it. Sure, maybe if it's a personal preference of what you like with sound, then sure, you can choose with the 2035 or the 4040. Or you could choose like the NT1 or this, depending on your preference. But that's mostly just a personal opinion. It's not necessarily saying, oh, this is just not a $300 microphone. No, this is a $300 microphone. It is worth $300. And the 2035, I will say, it is underpriced. So if you were to say this microphone is right where it's at, it's the proper price, the 2035 probably could be sold for about $200 and I'd be okay with it. I don't have any issues with either one, and like I keep saying, I prefer the 4040, but that's just me. And of course, down in the comments, let me know. I think I'm gonna put a comment. The first comment's gonna be pinned up top, and I'll just say, hey, which one do you prefer, 2035 or 4040? So give an answer there, and we'll have a discussion about it. So thank you all for watching. Hope you all enjoyed it. If you like this video, please hit the like button. It would be greatly appreciated. Helps this video, helps this channel. And if you're not already, please subscribe. It's a fun community. It's a good time. I stream every Wednesday and Saturday, so if you're subscribed, you'll know exactly when I'm going live. I usually set it up. I try to set it up the day before, but I don't exactly know the times. I'm trying to pin it down, but usually later on Wednesdays, probably like 6 o'clock, and earlier on Saturdays, maybe like 3 o'clock. And like I said before, down in the comment section, you can leave questions, comments, all that stuff. Which one you prefer, 2035, 4040. And yeah, all I ask is you be positive in the comments and in my stream chat. That's all I ask. And if you're interested, I have a Facebook group pinned on the banner. So you need to look in the bottom right corner of the banner. It's there. If you're on Facebook and you want to join a group and have a discussion, I just post Throwback Thursday stuff with old videos and old montages, and really just a fun group. Eventually, if the community gets big enough, I will make a Discord, but until that time, the Facebook group is easy to manage right now for the group that I have. And that's it for me. As always, be safe, be kind. I'll see you in the next video. I found a wireless transmitter. It goes for $300, but I got it for $2, and it doubles as a lav, which is wonderful. Where the fuck are we, Jacob? And why am I not your sexy counterpart?